I can say you are extra needy today. So
good morning, everybody. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Again, for those of you that are new, this is our Breakthrough Mastermind group, and today's topic is going to be on business liability. So for those of us that are business owners, this is something that gets overlooked all of the time. Extremely, extremely important. There is nobody better to speak about this than Bill Bolton. So Bill, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm super excited to dive into this. For those of you guys that don't know Bill, Bill has become a very close friend of mine. I mean, he's an incredible husband. He's an incredible father. He's got a lot of amazing things going on. As you know, or may not know, he owns Bill Bolton Insurance. And so if you guys are looking on the personal or the professional side, definitely make sure to reach out to him. This guy is extremely knowledgeable. I myself was in the field and he blows me away with all the knowledge he has. So definitely make sure you use that chat, get a conversation with Bill. And we're going to be diving into, again, business liability. So without further ado, Bill, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, we're jumping right in. Let's do it. Oh, you have to allow me to share my screen.
Oh, that's me. Hold on, stand by.
All right.
I'm not getting Zoom bombed, you know what I mean?
Well, as we're going through this, my name is Bill Bolton. I'm the president of BB Insurance.
All right, you're good.
All right, cool. Been in the industry for about 15 years, and I started my company about 2 years ago. And I am an insurance nerd. Can you all see this?
Yes.
All right, very good. So as we jump into this, we are going to take a 50,000 foot view of basic insurance need for a small business owner. We're going to go through a couple of different things. Like Keegan mentioned, business liability, and that's going to be the vast majority of the conversation today. And if we have enough time, we'll jump into a couple of other things. But here we go. We're going to get nerdy. This is the sexiest thing in the world, insurance. So let's try to have some fun with it. This is called a certificate of insurance. If you have not seen one of these yet, you will. One of your clients will request one. But this is really where we're going to focus most of our attention is, the basic needs for a small business owner. Things like general liability, commercial auto, umbrella, workers' compensation, and there you go. General liability, professional liability, commercial auto, commercial umbrellas. These two items we're not going to spend a ton of time on. I could spend all day talking about them because they get really into the weeds, but they will be mentioned at some point here. So let's start with general liability. So this is going to be required by every single contract that you sign. And the whole purpose of this is to protect your company against any lawsuits, any damages that come up from third parties. So if somebody else outside of your company sues you because of bodily injury or property damage, that means you hurt somebody's person or you mess their stuff up, and that's where this bucket of insurance money would come into play, and that would pay for your lawsuit and for any damages that you would have to pay thereafter. This is usually something that's really easy to underwrite, and it's very inexpensive to get for most companies, particularly small companies. We're talking a few $100s a year. Now, if you are doing some really heavy work, if you are, somebody in the trades, if you're climbing up cell phone towers, for example, and you're doing work on cell phone towers, which is something I've been through before. I not personally, but I insured something like this. Yeah, that sort of if you're working on very expensive, heavy items, general liability is going to be more expensive than somebody providing a professional service. And we're going to get into that as well. Oh, and by the way, I put in these fun pictures because, like I said, this is not the most fun thing to talk about. So most of the time, slips and falls, somebody has to walk into your office, slip and fall, break their leg. That's where this would come into play. Or if you were doing some work on somebody's computer and you break it, then at that point, this would come into play. Now, here's the difference between professional liability and general liability. Professional liability, it's really designed for anybody that offers a professional service. And there's a list of, a few examples down here: lawyers, doctors, CPAs, IT professionals, any kind of a consultant. I don't care what kind of a consultant you are. That is a professional service. Unless you're creating a widget, unless you're creating an actual product, something tangible, it's a professional service. And actually, real quick, right back to this general liability, there are professional exclusions on general liability policies. That means that general liability is not designed as a professional liability policy. It excludes all professional services. But yeah, the main purpose of professional liability is to protect you against financial damages. So if you offer advice to somebody and that advice ends up ruining a company, or they lose $50,000, $100,000, $1 million, your advice is a professional service. And then if somebody loses money, they're going to sue. It's just the nature of the world that we live in, especially our country. That's what professional liability is designed to do. The underwriting time is usually a little bit longer. The questions they ask are a little bit more strenuous, and it usually costs a little bit more than what general liability costs. Excuse me. And this is an important note: in both, general liability and professional liability, it will pay for your defense costs, as well as if you are found to be at fault, you would have to pay damages, punitive damages, whatever they may be. It pays for that as well. So commercial auto, most small businesses, unless you're in the trades, you don't have a commercial vehicle. However, if you had a vehicle titled under your business's name, you would need to have a commercial automobile policy. And looks like somebody's trying to get into the room. I guess I'm going to admit that.
I got it, Bill. Don't worry. You're good.
All right. I'm a host now too. It's great. Give me more power. So this is a more robust policy. If you buy your typical personal lines auto policy, the limits, the statutory limits are, $25,000. Which, by the way, increase those, because if you ding a Beamer, you're going to pay more than $25,000. But these are more robust policies. They do a whole lot more than a personal lines policy will do if you own vehicles. Now, not every company has a vehicle that's titled under their own company. That's when this is very important right here: hired and non-owned auto. HNOA. Always buy it. If you have any employees, always, whether or not you have a vehicle titled under your business. And the reason for this is because if your employee is going out on, going to the bank or going to, Office Depot or whatever it may be, just doing a simple little errand, and they run into a bus full of nuns and kills everybody, your company will be sued at that point. And if you don't have this in place, you're basically bankrupt at that point. It's usually very inexpensive, a couple $100 a year, but it's extremely important. And the other important thing is this will substitute for an actual commercial auto policy. So if you sign a contract where they say you have to have commercial auto, you can just do hired and non-owned auto. And I will actually go back and show you right here. It's part of a certificate of insurance, hired and non-owned autos. It's right there. And that will satisfy that contractual requirement for commercial auto. Workers' compensation. there is some liability involved here, some third party, very little, but this is something I do want to go over with everybody. There are these are statutory. I'm in the state of Virginia. In the state of Virginia, if you have 3 or more people working for your company, it's really more than 2. I know it sounds like the same thing, but people get confused about this. If there's more than 2 people doing work in your company, you are required by law to have workers' compensation. And there are 2 different parts to this. So workers' compensation, your employee gets hurt, they get fixed. They break their leg, fix the leg, life goes on. Now, the second part to this is called employer's liability. And I actually broke this out of the same COI, the certificate of insurance that I was just showing you. There are limits to employer's liability, EL. Workers' compensation, unlimited amount of money. And there are settlements, don't get me wrong, but unlimited amounts. But employer's liability, you do have limits. And they are statutory. They're required by law. 100,000, let's see, 100,000, 500,000, 100,000 are the lowest allowed limits in the state of Virginia anyways. And this varies from state to state. It costs almost nothing to increase them to $1 million. What employer's liability does, if your employee gets injured and they feel like you're actually more negligent than the accident was, and you as the employer messed something up and that's why they got hurt, they don't collect workers' compensation. They instead sue you, and they can get more money that way. And the settlements are much bigger at that point. And this is another really good point. 1099s are still considered W-2 employees under the statutes of workers' compensation in almost every state. So if you think that it's different than tax laws, at 1099, if you're telling somebody where to go, what to do, and you're paying them and you can hire and fire them, that's an employee under the statutes of workers' compensation. And I had another point there, but this is it. Even if you don't buy workers' compensation and you have an employee that gets injured, you are still on the hook to pay for those bills no matter what. So even if you have one person working for you, pay the extra $100, $200 a year and just get workers' compensation, because if somebody does get injured, they will try to collect money. Commercial umbrellas, people get confused about this sometimes. Umbrellas are pretty basic. So you add $1 million to everything that you have for a smaller fee than, what it would, a smaller premium than what it would take to go ahead and increase the limit otherwise. So if you have $1 million umbrella, you would add $1 million to your general liability, $1 million to your workers' comp employer's liability, and another $1 million to your commercial auto. And if you have a $2 million umbrella, obviously you would increase everything by $2 million. This does not apply to professional liability, cyber liability, directors and officers. Those are completely separate items. This is only for property and casualty products. And I know that it's a different word, but basically these 3 items right here is what the umbrella will increase your limit for. It's an easy, cheap way to increase your limits. We could talk about a couple of endorsements, and there's thousands of endorsements, but these are the 3 you will see most often. And now we're going to get a little bit nerdier. Additional insured, primary non-contributory, and waivers of subrogation. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about each one of these things, but just be aware that whenever you do sign a contract, they may request these items. Most of the time they will. If they do, you have to do it. And if you don't, and something happens, not only do you have a claim on your hands, but your client can then sue you for breach of contract. So pay very close attention to what their contract says, or at least work with somebody that knows, how to walk you through these things. And one thing we did not talk about is property, because that really has nothing to do with liability at all. But there are things called BOPs, a BOP, business owner's policy. And that's what most small business owners have. and that is general liability included in your property. So if you do have some property, some tangible property that you want to insure, you can have them put together. I hate the word bundled; it's used way too much these days, but you do put it together a lot with general liability and property and a BOP. They're designed specific to small businesses and all the big carriers out there, the Hartford, Travelers, CNH, all those guys. They have a perfect product for this sort of a thing, and it costs almost nothing to do. And if you own a business, if you're on this call and you own a business, this is probably what you have right now. And I think I'm within my time limit. And thank you.
Great job, Bill. Thank you so much, man. Yeah, of course. So, insurance, not one of the sexiest conversations, but it is relevant, right? So I do have one question for you, Bill, and I think that this is relevant on a couple different platforms, but one of the big things that stands out to me is, how does this affect a business owner with a hybrid model? So specifically what I'm saying is, if, let's say hypothetically, we have, let's just call it 3 people on our team, and they are working primarily at home, what does that look like in terms of the general or the workman's comp? For instance, if somebody's working from home and they sustain an injury, does that mean you're still liable because they're on the clock? Like, how does that work?
Anytime there's a work-related injury, yes, technically you are on the hook for it. Even if you're working from home, the likelihood of that happening is almost nil. But it really goes back to cost. So there are class codes for every type of employee. So if you're working from home and you have a clerical role, you're sitting on a computer, it costs almost nothing to put into place. But technically, yes, that you would still be on the hook for paying those damages. There are faulty workers' comp claims that happen every single day, and insurance carriers do investigations all the time to find out whether or not they have to pay for it. But technically, yes, if they are working from home and they get injured and they're on the clock, you're on the hook for it.
Eesh. Okay. Let me ask you this. What is the worst scenario that you've encountered?
The worst scenario I've encountered. Oh, geez. I have many stories about this. The worst scenario in insurance period is when you pay your premiums and then the insurance carrier says, no, we're not going to pay for that. That sucks. And that does happen quite a bit. That's because people like me are not doing their due diligence for their clients and actually reading, the contract and the insurance policy, which is a contract itself, and making sure that it actually, lines up with what you need. I had a client and, he was in DC, but he was doing a project. He was a cosmetic plastic surgeon, and he was doing a project in Boston, Massachusetts. And this happened to be like 6-7 years in the past. And he was just using his face, and he was getting paid by a Botox sort of a company to sell the product. And he never touched anybody, never did anything. But since he used a slideshow that was 1 year old and it wasn't, up to date, somebody's face got messed up because of the Botox procedure. And again, he never touched anybody. They sued him because of that. And the insurance carrier tried to back out of it. They said, nope, you had a misrepresentation on your application and you said you weren't doing this. And he was like, bullshit, I did this 7 years ago. So we had to go to bat for my client. And they said, fine, we'll go ahead and pay for it, assuming that we don't find anything else, to be faulty. But those are the worst situations. And there's a lot of, circumstances where that comes up. When you pay your premium and the insurance carrier will not pay for a claim, that's always the worst.
That's rough.
Hey,
so
Bill, I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Dale.
Sorry, yeah, Dylan, what's up?
Sorry to interrupt you, Keegan. Bill, first of all, thanks for giving this presentation. It was definitely helpful as somebody who's starting out a business. I wanted to ask what, like a general misconception of your world or just insurance in general from your stance? Like, what's like the biggest misunderstanding or like general misconception about what you do or what you can provide, or anything in that area?
Great question. All the commercials you see on TV, actually, some of them are really funny. Progressive has got some really funny ones. I mean, it's people have been trained to look at insurance people as, used car salesmen. And this is a commodity. It's not a commodity. It took me years to figure out how to go through, each, and I'd say contract. Insurance policies are contracts to go through them appropriately and provide a professional service myself. That's probably the biggest misconception, is that this is a commodity. This is anything but a commodity. The closest thing to a commodity is the workers' compensation that we just talked about, because that's really run by each state. So they're roughly the same everywhere you go. And it really does come down to price at that point. That's it right there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one thing.
So who's good for you to get in front of? Who do you guys work well with?
Who do I work well with? You mean client wise or?
Yeah, and industry wise, do you guys like
Sure.
like 3 different industries or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in Northern Virginia, so government contractors, love them. IT professionals, professional service providers. So the same things we just talked about. Anybody that needs professional liability or errors and omissions. I think I glazed over that one, but that's errors and omissions and professional liability are synonymous. Government contractors, IT professionals, lawyers, doctors, CPAs. Love doing that. If you're in the trades, anything blue collar, somebody that has multiple vehicles on the road. I don't want to work with, the guy that's going to come fix your bathroom up, make it look pretty. The dude in a truck. That's not my.
You're looking for like fleet people?
Yep. 100%. Yes.
All right. I got a good one for you. I'm going to introduce you to Christine. Christine's out here in the Philly Delco area. And they maintenance and work with tons of fleets, so I can hook you up with her. That's easy.
I'd love to do it.
So
I have some connections for her too.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. That's incredible, man. Look, guys, one of the things that I do want to point out when it comes to the insurance side as a business owner is that as much as it's important to find a good agent like Bill, at the end of the day, when we sign the contract, legally, it's our responsibility to know what's on that contract. People get insurance policies all the time and they don't read anything on it. They just get it. They forget about it. That can be very dangerous. Insurance is one of those things as an owner that it's better to have and not need than need and not have. I don't know. I've got a unique ideology on this, but I think once you get to a certain employee count, it's just a requirement. You just have to do it, because if you don't, you're shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, even if something doesn't happen over a 10-year span, you get to year 11 and it costs you millions of dollars, you're kind of SOL at that point. So I just figured I'd share that. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, anything that's relevant from a business owner standpoint? Any questions, Riss?
So how would you gauge that? You were talking about how, like, once you get to a certain number of how big your business is, do you gauge that on like how clumsy your people are and how risky you think they're going to be? Or is there a certain number where you think it's an idea where you really need to start thinking about insurance?
Yeah, I think this is a better question for Bill, but I guess in my eyes, it's simple. If I have one person working with me and they're a VA, for example, a virtual assistant, I may not be as inclined to get it, right? The probability of them hurting themselves, what's going to happen? They might get a paper cut or mess themselves up on a paper clip or something, right? But, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean that realistically, they're not doing a lot of like intensive work, right? But if we have 3 employees or maybe even just 2 employees, that's where it becomes relevant. I think what Bill said, and he may be able to touch on this more, is that if you're working with people that are high risk, it's a necessity. I look, for example, there are trees in the backyard that I want to clear out for my house, and I could absolutely do it. I could go up and clear those trees, no problem, but I'm not insured to do so. And so if something happens, for example, a tree falls on the house, now I become liable. Same thing is true with your business. It is, you're going to take risks, but at what point? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Bill.
Yeah, I do. You're 100% correct. To your point, Keegan, if you have, one clerical employee that's working from home, I wouldn't panic about going to buy workers' compensation. I wouldn't freak out if you don't have the correct insurance policies in place. Nobody's going to care. The state, at least in Virginia, the state of Virginia is not going to care if you don't have workers' compensation until somebody gets hurt. And then they'll start levying fines and doing all kinds of crazy things. And that becomes a real big pain in the butt. And Carissa, you asked, when's the right time to pay attention to these things, I think is what you were asking. Have something in place, at least something initially. And these are organic things. Insurance policies are. So as your company grows and changes, your insurance program changes along with it. So if you get a new contract and you've got to hire 20 people, like everything changes at that point. Maybe you go into a new operation, we'll change everything. I mean, everything can grow and move along with your business. So have something initially, find somebody you can trust that understands the industry and knows what they're doing. And most importantly, knows your industry. Don't work with somebody that has no idea about what you do. That's as dangerous as not buying insurance at all. Have something initially and then, let it grow with you.
Thank you.
Patty?
Yeah. So, when I had my center, I had my own insurance as a massage therapist, but I had other practitioners in with me. So, I had to get, and I want to say, Bill, it was probably like an umbrella one. Additionally, because if they had an issue with a client, because I was the owner of the thing, it could come back to me. So, it's like, you don't want to wait until you need it. Did I carry that for 18 years and never use it? Yes, but it's relatively inexpensive. And it's, it's worth that peace of mind that, even if somebody fell in my center, I would be responsible. So you don't want to wait until there's a crisis. And the other thing is when your person, like Bill was saying, they should know your industry. Like I know, and this is not business, but we had a homeowner's situation where there was a hurricane, flooded our whole lower level, ruined all our furniture. And they said, oh, act of God, right? But with more talking with the agent, we had a sump pump. So they said, oh, well, wait, your sump pump didn't go on. So they covered $10,000, so it pays to have a relationship where they'll kind of talk through the process with you.
Absolutely.
Just one piece of advice on this, guys, is I highly, highly, highly recommend to have a savvy insurance person on your team, just like I would with an attorney. It's one of those services that is going to be a requirement at some point. And even just to have somebody like Bill in your corner, if you have a question, you just easily reach out. Same thing is true with attorneys. I mean, I don't know if you guys come across this, but there are some contractual things that come up sometimes, and I'm like, I don't know what the right answer is here. I need a professional to discuss this. That would be an attorney, but I don't want to go out and build a new relationship and start this whole process. It's just good to have that person kind of on your team and there if you need them. So, I don't know, Bill, if you have any takeaways, so what I mean by that, I guess, is, are there any particular things that you would advise us to look at or for as an owner right now? So for instance, if we currently have a policy, is there anything that we should kind of graze through? Is there a particular page we should look at? Or maybe we don't have a policy at all for our business. What is a good piece of advice for starting that process?
Well, if you have something in place currently, good job. If you don't, just, find somebody, like I said, find somebody you can trust and work with them. Your first question is a loaded one. There's not like a specific thing, because every industry is different. Every policy is different. Every company is different within each one of those industries and policies. So how about this? I will say this. I'm happy to give, you don't have to work with me. It's okay. I'm happy to give you advice if you ever have any questions. And also you mentioned attorneys. I work with attorneys on a regular basis. I mean, I think like attorneys. My fiance is an attorney. I never win any fights, by the way. But if you want to talk to an attorney, I know a bunch of them that would be happy to at least have a conversation with you, pro bono. It wouldn't cost any money. So I'm here for free advice if you ever like it. But that first first question that you asked me is a loaded one. There's not one specific item. It's circumstantial. It just depends on what you're doing and how the policy reads. But I'm here if anybody needs anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, guys, take advantage of the chat. I think that Bill's just a great person to have on your team. I don't know if anybody else has any questions, comments, concerns regarding insurance. Anybody?
Bill, can you just throw your info in the chat, please? Just your email and stuff, and I'll take care of that intro later.
Yeah, I'll do it right now.
Awesome. So to break this up real quick, I'm going to actually share an insurance related story, and this is kind of irrelevant, but I just wanted to share it. Maybe somebody will come up with a question or something. I remember one time when I was doing insurance, we would work specifically with union-based companies. And how that would look is that we had a representative, a spokesperson that would go into these union halls and in these town meetings, and they would basically say, hey, look, guys, you've got this with the company. If you want any additional information or whatever that looks like, fill out this little 3x5 card and we're going to send it in. So these people would fill these little cards out and they'd send it in, and we'd get the cards and we'd reach out to people, right? We'd call them, schedule an appointment, come and give them the information. Now, I was doing this in Baltimore at the time, and I had called this one guy, and they were part of the Bowlers Association, right? So that's an actual union. And at first I was like, bowling association, cool, whatever. I'll give this guy a call. So I call him and he starts cussing me out. He's like, hey, I never want to see you. I never want to hear from you again. Don't reach out to me. I'm like, okay, well, you asked for the information, but cool, I got you. No worries. You won't hear from me again. So I throw the lead away, never reach out to this guy. Like 3 months pass and I find myself in Baltimore County. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Baltimore, but it can get a little rough there. And I show up to this house, I knock on the door, and I find out that this happens to be a lead from that same guy's wife. Didn't know it at first. And at first I'm just like, hey, I'm here because you guys requested some information. I've been trying to get in touch with you for X amount of time. So sorry I couldn't reach you. I just wanted to drop by and see if there's a good day or time that I can get this stuff out to you guys. And so I do it. And she's just sitting there like, you really should leave. My husband's going to be home soon. You're not going to want to be here when he gets here. And I'm like, okay, is there a particular reason? And as soon as I say that, this guy pulls up, and this dude looks like the leader of a mafia. He's got like gold chains and he's got like, barely a shirt on. He's carrying what looks like a bowling bag, but I can tell that there's no bowling ball in it. So I'm like, this guy is doing something else. And he finally comes up, and I introduce myself, and he's like, I'll be back in 1 minute. He goes inside. I kid you not. He comes out with a loaded gun and points it right at me. He's like, you have, 3 seconds to get off my property. And so I was irate. And so I kind of contested him a little bit. I was like, anyway, long story short, I ended up leaving and not speaking to the guy or selling any insurance. But that was one of my fun insurance stories that I thought I would share with you guys. But Bill, so anything else that you'd like to leave with us?
That's why I only do commercial insurance right there.
There you go.
And that's why you always leave a note.
Right?
Hopefully you were insured, Keegan, in the case that you might have needed that.
There you go.
I see, insurance helps.
Keegan, how many times have you been at gunpoint?
In Baltimore or in my life?
In your life?
Probably 10. I've been shot at a couple times. Yeah.
We're going to work.
You're hanging with the wrong people, Keegan. Goodness.
We're going to work on this next week. How to not get shot at.
You got to stop selling drugs, dude. I'm telling you.
It wasn't even drug. I was fishing one time. All right,
Oh,
Matt,
yeah.
what do you have for
Don't
me?
kind of-
I know
I
you've
was
got
gonna say
something.
is, yeah, by the way, it was great meeting you this weekend. So I think Keegan should work for the tourism board for Baltimore. What do you think?
Shoots it straight.
All
Because
right,
you can
guys, so
tell
look,
people, Baltimore, come here and get the point, you know?
so just to be really constructive, because we're probably going to close out a little bit earlier today. We closed out a little early last time. Are there any other questions that you guys have for Bill? Anything that you can pick his brain with right now that's based on insurance, experiences, anything like that, in terms of the liability and protecting our business as an entity?
I've actually got a question. So somewhat related to, I'm actually currently looking for a new CPA for tax prep. And someone made an introduction for me, so I talked to him. I live in Indiana, have always gotten my taxes done in Kentucky. The lady that I got introduced to is in New York. And in talking to her, I think she's great at what she does, but it was so much of, yeah, we'll have to look into that. We'll have to see what the laws there are. Do you recommend typically in the insurance world having someone local that just already knows a lot of that back end stuff, or someone that is just comfortable in looking into it for you?
A really good question, Jen. Yeah, I mean, somebody local, so you could at least go and wring their neck if they screw something up, I guess is the main point. But the only real statewide or countrywide state mandate is the workers' compensation. That's all statutory. So if you are, for example, like I said, I'm in Northern Virginia, so I've got Maryland, DC, Virginia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, all right here. So in each one of those states, well, in the district, they all have different laws. Luckily I'm right here, so I can, I know how to navigate those waters. But every other insurance product, they're all, we call it, worldwide or enterprise wide. So it doesn't matter what state you're in. I have clients in Washington State, Georgia, Tennessee, Maryland, Virginia. They're all over the country. As long as they know how to do the game, and CPAs and law as well. That's all very different. Insurance, you can get, you can actually work with somebody from another state. That's not that big of a deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Jen.
I got a question, Bill. So, you ever see an opportunity? I mean, I know this started in the 40s after the war and shit like that, but is there ever going to be a time where like insurance companies instead of businesses will have to offer like health insurance? Like Geico has like 15 million users and clients. Like, why can't they bundle home, auto, life, and health together? Like, why is your job on the hook for that?
That's a really good question. Litigation. That's really what it comes down to there. That's why you have different types of policies for different types of businesses. So, you can't really, an insurance carrier, they really have to stay within their own lane. They need to stick within their own niche. So, a property and casualty guy like me, like I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to health insurance, but I'm not that good at it because I haven't focused my attention on it. You can't really be a jack of all trades. That we're talking about massive pools of money. So I guess somebody easily Geico could just say, sure, we'll do health insurance, but I don't know, maybe that's, more of a marketing thing. Like they're making their money in one area and they don't need to jump into the other. But again, there's a lot of litigation that goes into all of this, even within just in property and casualty. What I do, you can't just have a policy that says everybody's insured, because that's not possible. I mean, everybody is not the same. So you have to have different things or different insurance policies to insure different parts of the world. I think I answered your question. That's really interesting. I've never heard that one.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like before the war, World War II, that was one of the big things they were pushing, was to bring people back to work, was to offer insurance. And then it kind of became your job offered that. And then the 3 other available insurance types were then offered by insurance companies. So everyone's to fix it. I just feel like you've got multiple huge corporations that have millions and millions of people. Why not? They're talking about, like you said, they're talking about bundles all day. Just add another one to the bundle. But I mean,
yeah, I mean, well,
I'm not an insurance guy, you know.
No, but you know, the government's trying to take over, you know, healthcare anyway. So maybe it'll be public or private. But yeah, here's an example. So there are circumstances where that kind of a thing comes up. There's something called TRIA. It's called the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act. It was passed in 2002, right after 9/11, 2001, where because technically when those planes hit the towers, that was an act of war. Terrorism in the United States really wasn't a big thing at that point, at least not to that scale. So that was considered an act of war. And acts of war are excluded on insurance policies, property and casualty, life insurance, you name it. It's all excluded, acts of war. Technically, when all that happened, the insurance companies could have walked away and not paid a dime. For the life insurance was one of the big ones. But just the property for the towers itself, the liability around it. I mean, it was just a massive, massive insurance issue. And it was AIG really that, spearheaded the entire, drive to get it all paid for. But they all got in, kind of one big room and said, we're paying for this. And they did. They paid everybody out. But that's when Congress came in and enacted TRIA, the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act. So they do mandate certain things. They do require by law certain things into insurance policies. I'm surprised that nothing's come up about COVID, but that does happen where they will, your people's or companies' hands are forced to go ahead and, do certain things. But
good thing that Larry Silverstein changed his policy in July of 2001 too. So
yeah, okay,
to cover that.
Good points, guys. Anybody else before we close out? No? Okay, guys. So as always, go ahead and use that chat. Bill threw his information in there. If you have any additional business related questions, go ahead and reach out to him directly. But thank you all so much, guys. I greatly apologize for the little bit of delay this morning. 100% my fault. So if you guys need anything, let me know. Have an incredible Tuesday. Ryan, Jen, everybody else, thank you guys for your help and for throwing up the additional Zoom room. But if you guys need anything, let me know, and let's make it an amazing Tuesday today. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. See you.
Bye.
thank you all very much.
Yeah.